Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining today's workshop, 5G Networks, Strategies for Enabling Standards-Driven Technologies and Innovation. My name is Rebecca McVeigh and I'm the Senior Director for TIA Quest Forum. This is the second time that TSDSI and TIA have partnered to present a workshop, and we find the collaboration to be very valuable to both organizations. This workshop is being recorded and will be posted to both the TSDSI and TIA websites within the next few days. So if you want to re-listen to any of the material or recommend it to any of your colleagues, it will be available. It should be noted that all attendees will be muted throughout the workshop. So if you want to have any questions for the speakers, just provide them in the questions tab. If we do not have time to get to all the questions, they will be answered and included with the posted workshop. Also, there are 5 handouts in the Handouts tab that you are welcome to view and download at your convenience. Next slide, please. We have with us today TSDSI's chair, Mr. N.G. Subramaniam, and TIA's Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Dave Stehlin, for the workshop inauguration. We will begin with Mr. Subramaniam. Next slide, please. Mr. Subramaniam is the chair of the Telecommunications Standards Development Society of India, or TSDSI. He is also the Chief Operating Officer and Executive Director of Tata Consultancy Services and Chairman of Tata Elxsi Limited. Welcome, Mr. Subramaniam.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. Mr. Stehlin, Mr. Kaufman, Mr. Flave, my colleagues Sharat Arora, Prakash, Sri Narendranath, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of TSDSI, it's my absolute pleasure and privilege to extend a warm welcome to all of you to this online session on 5G networks. Telecommunication networks and related technologies have become the backbone for consumers and businesses alike, thanks to the mobile penetration, the app ecosystems, e-commerce, and marketplaces. The resilience of these networks, the internet, cloud infrastructure, and collaboration technologies have become the backbone during this pandemic for all of us to continue the work as usual. And they have been proven beyond doubt their usefulness and the necessity nature of it during this pandemic. Had the pandemic outbreak happened a few years earlier, we would have faced even larger impact, is my take. From India perspective, we are all gearing ourselves to accelerate the 5G technology adoption with at-scale deployment of use cases, prototyping, and experimentation. This will get further momentum with the planned infrastructure and the investments that the government is planning in the areas like railway modernization, new infrastructure like airports, smart cities, smart farming, and so on. All this will leverage sensors and device-to-device communication, and the complexity of the network and the data that will pass through will only increase. The government and the industry are also taking steps to increase the availability of public Wi-Fi hotspots, seamless roaming, as well as rural connectivity and inclusivity. As India advances our agenda in this direction, the need to assess mitigate, and operate through vulnerabilities is an important aspect. And things like security, performance, reliability, interoperability, all will become very, very crucial. It is timely that TSDSI and TIA came together to conduct this online workshop, an online information sharing session on 5G networks with specific focus on security, performance, reliability, and service reliability, more importantly. And I would like to compliment and thank TIA for conducting this workshop, for enabling standards-driven technologies and innovation, which is addressing some of the critical aspects that I mentioned above. So with this, I would like to once again thank Mr. Stehlin and his team for joining hands with TSDSI, and I'm sure the participants will be extremely benefited by the contents of this workshop. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Mr. Subramaniam. Very much appreciated. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Dave Stehlin. Mr. Stehlin joined as TIA's Chief Executive Officer in September of 2019. He brings more than 30 years of experience leading the development and implementation of key business and technology strategies in the telecommunications industry. Prior to starting his career in the ICT industry, Dave was a captain in the U.S. Marine Corps. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks, Becca, and it's my honor to be here today. And thank you to TSDSI and Mr. Subramaniam for inviting us and working with us on these very important subjects. This workshop could not be happening at a better time. And I think the title captures it all. 5G networks, strategies for enabling standards-driven technologies and innovation. As our world becomes more and more connected, it is imperative that the ICT industry looks at the future strategically, though. The reach of these new technologies extends further than ever before, into buildings and into factories and homes, and connected and autonomous vehicles, but also around the globe through cabling and connected systems, data centers and supply chains, on to companies and consumers. The safety of our wired and mobile networks, for example, is paramount to the success of our industry and really our economies. In order to reach the potential of the technology, we need technical and process standards that enable, improve, and protect. Standards play a critical role in driving adoption and pervasiveness of new technologies. Standards drive down costs and improve operational performance. In summary, proper standards are needed to help these critical new technologies reach their potential. And here are a few examples of needed new standards. Our networks are more and more software driven, and yet we haven't developed standards to manage, guide, and measure the relationship between the software developer or supplier and the system operator, customer, or partner. We haven't holistically looked at the cost of quality as it pertains to software rollouts and upgrades, yet we have all experienced software maintenance upgrades that have gone terribly wrong. The cost of these software issues is significant in terms of having to rework the release, and there of course is the lost opportunity cost for not doing it right the first time. And then there's security. As our networks get more connected and more software driven, the risks skyrocket. We must develop process improvement standards that verify trust and measure the performance of the supply chain and the components and the vendors in the supply chain. We'll continue to see an increase in hacks and security breaches and see tremendous costs until we address the problem at the root. And that involves building in supply chain security. China, for example, has been very aggressive in driving standards. That, of course, supports their own national interests. They've publicly described their focus on leading the development of international standards and have put their very best people on this work. They clearly understand the importance of standards development and standards leadership. And I think with TSDSI, TIA, and all of our members and partners also recognize this important aspect and the need for standards and the need for standards leadership. And by being here today and working on this workshop, we're standing up and saying we're going to help drive this market forward in a transparent and professional way. So in summary, your work is critical to the future of our businesses, our industry, and perhaps our economies. TSDSI and TIA, through hard work, can together significantly improve the state of our industry. And I thank you for your commitment to our mutual success. I'll turn it back to you, Becca.
Thank you so much, Dave. I appreciate your comments and starting off this important workshop. Next slide, please.